Hello, family. I hope you're having an awesome time in your church at home today. We are going through for the next couple of months the theme of hope. And today's story that we find in Exodus is a really interesting one because God's people weren't feeling that hopeful. In fact, they were feeling trapped and hemmed in at every side. They were literally hemmed in at every side, but they were never without hope, even if they didn't see it or feel it. And that's the same for us. Sometimes we need to be reminded or wake up and see to live in confidence and assurance that we have hope. I love the story of Moses and the Israelites, of God rescuing them and setting them free. I love all the plagues and looking at them with kids because some of them are pretty gross and kids really enjoy them. I love that God used someone like Moses, who wasn't great at public speaking, to address the whole nation of Egypt. I love that God used Moses, even though he committed murder, that there isn't anyone that God can't use in his mission. But my most favourite thing in the story of Moses and God's people is that they moaned. They were human. They forgot of the miracles and lived sometimes in fear and in disbelief. And I know that's a funny thing to be my favourite, but it reminds me that even they struggled. They struggled to look for and remember the goodness of God. And they were first-hand experiences of God's redeeming power before even the death and the resurrection of Christ. Sometimes we all struggle, don't we? We forget how far God has brought us, how much of the carrying he has done in our relationship and in our lives. But in the story of God and his people, we are shown time and time again, even when they and we struggle, we forget, we moan, we lose faith, God never gives up. He always remains faithful and he always sustains. We are never without hope. Can I ask you a question? Have you ever felt trapped physically? Is the thought of it enough to freak you out? When I was younger, adults would talk about claustrophobia and how they were so scared of it. And I'd be like, whatever. That's so weird to be scared of being trapped in a small space. Now, as an adult, the thought of being trapped in a tight space makes me actually feel like I want to vomit. How about feeling emotionally trapped? I'm sure most of us have encountered feeling this at some point in our lives. It's horrible, isn't it? Maybe we felt trapped in a relationship, in a job, in a circumstance that is beyond our control. Maybe just recall those times. Maybe you're going through it right now. Did you or do you feel disappointment in those times because you have questions like, God, why are you allowing this to happen? I for sure have. In the Bible passage today, we learn that God has set his people free from the slavery of Egypt, but at this very point had placed them where they were trapped, hemmed in at every side, at the mercy of their oppressors once again. Or so it seemed. What was God up to? He had led them here. Why would he do that? In my life, I've had these feelings of God. Why have you led me here when everything seems so against you, God? So not of you, Lord. Why have you allowed this situation to happen? Why can't something just work out for me for once in my life? How much more must the Israelites have felt this? Why, God, do you rescue us 1 minute and the next minute forsake us? The reality is that where I go, where we go, where the Israelites went, every step, every direction, every stop and start, every path taken or untaken, every winding road and treacherous journey, every mountaintop and dark valley, God is walking with us. And this means we are never, ever without hope. We read in the passage today, as Pharaoh approached, the Israelites looked up and saw them, the Egyptians, coming at them. They were totally afraid. They cried out in terror to God. They told Moses, weren't the cemeteries large enough in Egypt that you had to take us out here to die in the wilderness? What have you done to us, taking us out of Egypt? Back in Egypt, didn't we tell you this would happen? Didn't we tell you leave us alone in Egypt? We're better off as slaves in Egypt than as corpses in the wilderness. And Moses spoke to the people, don't be afraid. Stand firm and watch God do his work of salvation for you today. Take a good look at the Egyptians, for you're never going to see them again. God is always true to his word. He is our firm foundation. And yet we can say this, sing it, declare it. But sometimes we struggle to have hope. We don't see a big picture of what God might be up to. We are in pain and desperate for change, for healing, for miracles to happen. And none of it seems to be coming. So what do we do then? There are so many things that we can do in this time. But I think it's important that we share with each other today, after this video, what is good for you? What do you do in these times? Because maybe there's people in our church at homes who are going through the rubbish right now. But there's some things that we can all do, pressing into God, looking at his word, spending time in prayer and worship, not just on our own, but in fellowship. We need to be able to have others to go to lift us up in prayer. Pressing into God is always the best plan. But there's something that the Israelites forgot to do over and over again. And I think it's a trap we can all fall into way too easily. They forgot of the goodness of God, of what he had already done, of how far he had already brought them, of how God had already rescued them, broke the chains of slavery and set them free. God has brought us all so far. He has done all this and so much more for us. We are no longer captives to sin and to death. We are no longer trapped. We are not without hope because we have a reason, and that reason is Jesus Christ. After God parted the Red Sea and saved his people once again, the Bible tells us, and when the Israelites saw the mighty hand of the Lord displayed against the Egyptians, the people feared the Lord and put their trust in him and Moses, his servant. We don't need to wait for whatever needs to be resolved in our lives to have this reaction to God. He has already set us free. Therefore, we can have hope. But sometimes, just sometimes, we need to be reminded of it. And that's okay. We don't need to beat ourselves up about it. We serve a loving, compassionate and patient God who will always bring his light. Even when we feel hemmed in at every side, we cannot be without hope when we have Jesus. No matter how trapped we may be feeling, we will always live in the ultimate freedom because Jesus has already set us free. This week, I pray that you will know of the hope that we have. Hope not just in the good times, not in the mountaintops, but in the dark valleys as well. That we are never really trapped because Jesus has already set us free. Let's live that out this week. As we discuss now in our church at homes, remember to pray for one another, that any chains that need to be broken will be broken, that we have been set free already. Have a blessed week, remembering that you are always with hope.